Thomas Castellanos is gone. The SMU game is coming up. Can Boston College get themselves a ranked win on the road?
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You'll get your season started with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with a $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. So Thomas Castellanos is gone, but this episode is not about him. We talked about him earlier this week. If you want to hear that, go check that out. This is about a big weekend game that BC now has against SMU. And with us to talk about it, we have Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
Well, I don't know if this is the worst week of being a BC fan or covering BC sports, but I would say it's definitely down there.
Yeah, it's been pretty lousy, and we're here to talk about it. So we're going to look at this game. This is arguably the hardest game BC has on their schedule, which was not what Mitch and I thought at the beginning of the year. We're going to look at, the strengths of the Mustangs, what BC can do, and give you our predictions, and we'll get into that. So, Mitch, BC, they lose their quarterback. Thomas Castellanos is gone. I think everyone knows that at this point. What are we going to look at? What's this offense going to look like with Grayson James?
I think the one thing that you can say about Grayson James piloting this offense is that he opens up the quick passing game a little better than what Thomas Castellanos was doing and we talked about this, I think, during the first bye week, was that because Castellanos was so short, he has some trouble, reading the defense and throwing short passes because that's where he has trouble seeing. But he can see in the intermediate and downfield area because, you're kind of looking up and over the linemen, whereas if it's short, you're kind of you have to look like through them or around them. So that part of the playbook was not always accessible for him. And when Grayson James has played this season against Western Kentucky and then for the last few drives against Syracuse, we've seen that be able to be part of the offense. We've seen him be in empty formations and throw quick to the tight ends, throw quick outside to Lewis Bond, attack the intermediate area with some deep in breakers and stuff like that. He had a few nice out routes to the sideline. But obviously, you're not, and granted, BC hasn't had this most of the season. You're not getting that quarterback run game as much. He's decently mobile, but obviously not like Castellanos at the height of his powers. And with James, he has a bit of the Tommy gene where if that first read isn't there, he kind of struggles to get through all of his progressions and get to the next receiver and get the ball out on time. We even saw that on even really the two of his big touchdowns. The game winner against West Kentucky to Jerron Bradley, held on to the ball for a long time. The one to Jeremiah Franklin, he came open pretty immediately, and it seemed like it took him forever to throw that ball. So that is troublesome because the offensive line has had some issues with pass protection. A lot of sacks given up this year, and some of that is Castellanos holding onto the ball and trying to make a play. With James, you're not going to see as much creation, but you hope that he can get the ball out quicker and then therefore mitigate some of those sack issues. You're muted.
I cannot believe I keep doing that. Now that he's under center, hopefully this run game is going to get
He will
better.
Still be in shotgun, I will say.
You still be in shotgun, and will you do pistol too, you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'll all be pistol and shotgun.
Okay. How do you think this offense is going to be able to handle this SMU defense?
The thing about the SMU defense is that even though a lot of the players are back from last year's team, this is a very different unit, and especially in the front. They brought in a ton of transfers from Power 5 schools on the defensive line. Namely, they brought over Jafari Harvey, who's a defensive end from Miami, Jared Harrison Hunte, who's a defensive tackle from Miami. Both of them are 6-year players. They've been around for forever. They brought in a few other veterans, Mike Lockhart, who was at, I think, Georgia Tech and West Virginia, and then Anthony Booker, who was at Maryland and Arkansas. And they didn't play a ton at those places, but Booker especially, and they also brought in Jonathan Jefferson from Georgia. And Booker and Jefferson are big dudes. They've played in the SEC. they are bringing that size and strength that wasn't really the case with SMU last year. And we saw BC able to run the ball super well in them against the Fenway Bowl. But SMU's been excellent against the run this year. I think they're fifth in yards allowed per game. They're fourth in yards per rush allowed. And part of that, a function of that is that SMU's offense gets out big leads throwing the ball, and so teams have to abandon the running game. And even when they do run, it's like you're down by a few scores, so it doesn't really change anything. But still, SMU's defense, they're top. I think they're top 20 in defensive success rate. Let me see if I can find the stat real quick. Let me see. They're 11th in defensive rushing success rate and 6th in defensive EPA per rush. So even still situations, they're doing a good job defending the run. And Bill O'Brien talked about this with their defenses. They do a great job of disguising coverage, it's interesting because they run they are a very cover 3 heavy defense. So kind of similar to what BC was doing before under Jeff Hafley. They run cover 3 on 49.7% of their snaps, which is the third highest rate. But they do a really good job of disguising that. They rotate. They usually start with 2 safeties deep before the snap and when the huddle breaks. But like right before the snap, they'll rotate one down, and then they can get into a lot of different coverage looks from still just lining up with 2 high. So they can get into cover 2, cover 4 quarters, cover 1. They can do a lot of different stuff that confuses opposing offenses.
Okay, so it's gonna be challenging.
Yes.
It's gonna be a tough going. And now with James, this is his. It's a homecoming for him. He's coming back. I said 35 minutes yesterday. I heard up to 20 minutes away. So he lives obviously very close to Dallas. Is this defense going to be too much for him?
I personally think so. Grayson James has never started a game against a Power 4 opponent. Now, you could say SMU is recently up jumped, but they're a top 15 team right now. They're playing really well. They've pretty much been dominating opponents. That they have 2 ranked wins against Louisville, which was a close game on the road, and then the other week they blew out Pitt. Their 1 loss is to BYU, who BYU has turned out to be a pretty good team in that game. It was pretty close. They've been lucky. They've gotten to play some pretty bad teams. They've gotten to play Florida State. They've gotten to play Stanford. They had a very strange game against Duke. But for James, he's never faced a defense like this. And we saw him against West Kentucky where, again, they won the game. They won the game by 1 point. But they won the game because of the running game coming alive and Donovan Ezeraka in the defense getting enough plays in the second half. Grayson James was pretty erratic as a passer in that game, I would say. He made some nice plays. He kept the offense moving sometimes, but there were also a lot of plays that he left on the field, and he had a really bad interception that game. And against Syracuse, again, the running game won that game. He made a few timely throws here and there, but in this game, we'll talk about the defense in a little bit, but when you're going against an SMU offense that is very prolific and is more dynamic than Syracuse's, which Syracuse was just a pass-heavy offense. SMU is a lot more like Virginia Tech. They can beat you in a lot of ways. It's going to be tough if James has to, match that offense drive for drive, especially against a defense that is playing quite well.
Now, in a moment, Mitch and I are going to look at this game, and we're going to try to find a way. What can BC do to win this? It's been a funky season. Maybe there's something they could do that BC could find a way to get that victory. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they constantly deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. And if you have not already check out Locked On ACC. I'm sure Kenton Gibbs has a very different viewpoint on this whole Thomas Castellanos thing. In fact, I heard pieces of it earlier, and he definitely does. So go check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's talk about an 18.5 points underdog last I had checked, right?
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
this seems like it's going to be a mountain to climb for Boston College. What offensively and defensively, what can they do to win this game?
So defensively, they need to create turnovers, and that's pretty broad. It's pretty surface level. But if you look at how BC has played this year, they've been extremely reliant on turnovers. The two games where they haven't forced any turnovers were Missouri and Virginia, and that really, and you could say that okay, they stopped Virginia inside the red zone on a fourth down, so it's kind of a turnover. But I digress. Not getting any turnovers is really doing this team. Even you look at the games they've gotten multiple turnovers, like Virginia Tech and Louisville, where turnovers spark this comeback in the third quarter. They get it within a touchdown, and then look at Louisville, get some turnovers early. They got this big lead, and then obviously they blow it. So BC defense needs to find turnovers. They did a good job of that against Syracuse, forcing those 2 fumbles. They're being aggressive going after the ball, so that's good to see. You're probably gonna need to get an interception here or there. They haven't had a ton of those in recent weeks. I think generally putting in new defensive backs and having some younger players, they're not as experienced, not as used to the system. So, you're not playing as aggressively. You're more focused on your assignment. But that's something that's got to happen. They're going to have to force turnovers. And SMU, their turnovers kind of come in bunches. They've had 2 games, BYU and Stanford, where they've turned the ball over 3 times, and they turned the ball over 6 times or 5 times. I can't remember exactly, but against Duke in a very strange game. So they kind of come in bunches. So if you can create 2 or 3 turnovers, that can give this offense a chance because, again, SMU's defense is going to be like Syracuse, where it's like they're going to get their points. They're going to have some explosive plays. They are a very, very, very fast team. And Bill O'Brien spoke about having – I asked about this and he spoke about it, about the importance of tackling. You can't let these guys get yards after contact, yards after the catch, because if they break a tackle – most of their skill position players are liable to take it to the end zone because they're so freaking fast. So you got to get turnovers, get them off the field. On offense, it's very simplistic, but you got to run the ball to control the clock and keep that offense on the sideline. If you're BC's offense, you want to limit the number of possessions this game has for both teams, and pretty much for yourself. You want to have these long drives take up time. The Syracuse game was kind of weird because you had a bunch of turnovers. So there was like 26 possessions, which is pretty high for college football these days. So those are really the 2 keys. Beyond that, Grayson James, again, needs to kind of not have the Tommy syndrome where there are these killer turnovers. He's got to take care of the ball, but I think they're going to try their best to, kind of take the game out of his hands, run the ball well. Again, SMU is very good at defending the run, but I don't know if they've seen an offense like BC's that wants to run the ball the way that BC does out of certain personnel groups and make that their entire game plan. They faced a lot more of these spread teams, option teams that want to play fast, up tempo. Like when they played TCU, who they basically play the same kind of offense, that game ended like 66-42. That's the game they want to play. They don't want to play these rock fights, which that was the case last year in the Fenway Bowl, which again was played late December in Boston on a baseball field that got turned into a swamp because it was during a monsoon. And that really helped slow down SMU's offense, gave BC advantage there. This game, I believe it's going to be in the high 60s, beautiful late fall day in Texas. Weather is going to be, helping SMU, if anything.
Now, who could be an X factor in this game? Like if there's a name that like maybe would jump out to you as like a guy that could really, if he has a big game, this is going to turn for BC. Who would you think of?
I mean, past performance is not a predictor of future things, but I mean, you probably just say Quintavious Hutchins at this point because the guy just finds a way to get his hands on the ball.
Yep.
So you got to think he get a turnover in some way. It's tough because SMU also doesn't really have a favorite receiver. They spread their targets around. They've got like 5 or 6 receivers that all have like between 20 and 30 targets and between like 18 and 25 receptions. Former BC commit RJ Maryland, their star tight end, is out for the season. He still leads the team in most receiving categories. But their receivers, Jake Bailey, Keyshawn Smith, Moochie Dixon, Roderick Daniels, they spread the ball around a lot. They get the running back Brashard Smith involved in the pass game a lot. He's electric. He's awesome. And even now, like they're finding their backup tight end, Matthew Hibner, who's a Michigan transfer. He was more of their blocking tight end, but now they're starting to get him involved in the pass game, and he's been pretty solid there. So it's hard to like find a match because they're just going to take what the defense gives them. Like they're not going to try to force the ball to anybody. So I think, again, a key is BC not missing tackles. And so one thing that I'm looking at is if Cam Arnold doesn't play, I know we've praised Owen McGowan a lot on this podcast recently. He's played well in these last few games. I think if I were Tim Lewis and Bill O'Brien, I would not be putting Owen McGowan on the field a lot because I think that Brashard Smith is a track sprint guy. He's a kick returner. Like his name of the game for him is speed. That's not Owen McGowan's game. So you need, even though Sione Hall has been a little inconsistent, but you need more athleticism on the field. So I think you see a lot of him. And Sione Hall kind of plays like Davian Crouch. They both play fast. They want to hit hard, and that can lead to being too aggressive, missing tackles sometimes. So can they rein that in and use their athleticism to help limit those explosive plays? So that's one huge matchup where that could kind of pivot the game. On the other side of the ball, I think this could be a good big game for Jeremiah Franklin. He's been getting involved in the offense more and more. I think Grayson James targeted him a good bit in the Western Kentucky game. So, when BC gets into, if they're running the ball, but they still get into these third and mediums, third and shorts. If they obviously he loves Lewis Bond on those drag routes, but look for Jeremiah Franklin make some plays. They've kind of been designing some plays to get him the ball. So I think that's one guy for BC that I think could end up having a big game.
And of course, the biggest X factor is special teams.
Yeah.
If BC has a bad special teams day again, none of this matters because, good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, looking at SMU special teams, they're pretty solid to good across the board. I haven't really found any weaknesses there. So hopefully Liam Connor can continue to build his performance against Syracuse, which, by the general college football standards was still mediocre maybe, but for BC standards, he looked like Ray Guy or Alex Howell out there. He was a punter back in the 2010s, I think.
Ryan Quigley.
There we go.
Yep. We'll go with the old school ones, right? All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions. We'll get back to that in just a moment. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's America #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, Mitch and I use this Friday show to talk about our college picks of the week. And let's start off with Virginia Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 23.5-point favorite. What do you get there, Mitch?
I'm going to take Virginia here. I think this game is at Notre Dame, correct?
It is.
I'm still picking Virginia. They've been scrappy. They took out Pitt last week. They obviously really struggled against Clemson, but that's a whole other ball game. Notre Dame has been good. They're ranked pretty highly, but I don't think they've really been great. And I've been really impressed. I was somebody who was pretty critical and negative of Tony Elliott, but I think he's got this program clicking right now. So I would take Virginia in the points here.
All right.
So that's a lot of points. 20 points that's a lot.
Okay. All right. Next, let's go with Missouri and South Carolina. South Carolina is a 14-point favorite here.
Yeesh, I think this is baked in that Brady Cook, Missouri's quarterback, is not playing. This game is in South Carolina. South Carolina's played exceptionally well at home. That defense is killer. I think that South Carolina probably covers this one. You could probably, even if you wanted to tease the lineup a little bit, I think that they win this game pretty easily. Because again, Missouri, their offense is just not doing much now with I think it's Drew Pine at quarterback now.
Mm-hmm.
And the defense has just been kind of inconsistent. And last week against Oklahoma was, I don't know if you watched that last 2 minutes where both teams scored 2 touchdowns in a minute 30 of game time, with it being touchdown, defensive touchdown, touchdown, defensive touchdown. It was crazy. So I think South Carolina wins that one pretty easily.
I forgot one other ACC game. Clemson, 11.5-point favorite over Pitt, who may be playing without Eli Hosteen, but
yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm taking Clemson all day here. Pat Narduzzi's has had some success against Clemson in the past. I think the Pitt train is really starting to fall off the tracks here. It's not, and also if you look at the numbers and kind of really watch the Pitt offense, Holstein has not really been that good. He's the second most turnover worthy plays in all of college football among quarterbacks. So that's a problem. And even Nate Yarnell has not been good in relief. And say what you will about Clemson, that defense is still playing pretty well. And I think that I think Pitt is also having some offensive line injuries, and that really killed them last year. So I think Clemson wins this one, no problem.
All right. And finally, we'll do one more. Do Georgia the game day game of the week. It is Georgia and Tennessee, with Georgia at 9.5-point favorite. Uh, Tell me what you're going to pick here, because I have no clue.
Yeah, this is disgusting. It's tough just because we don't know if Nico. I
I
don't
was
know
going
how
to
to
say, I don't
say
know.
it. I am a Liava, I think is close.
Yep.
We don't know if he's going to play as a concussion. You think I think it was reported he did practice this week, so you think he's going to try to give it a go. It is in Georgia. I don't even know who Tennessee's backup is, to be honest. But it's just so hard to pick Georgia because just of how crappy they've looked over the last 2 weeks. That being said, their back is really against the wall. I think Georgia pulls this one out. I think Georgia wins. I think Tennessee will cover. I think this one's gonna be pretty low scoring.
They're also without Trevor Etienne, and so it's going to be
That's
more
true.
of a
God dang it.
rely.
Okay,
More,
they definitely taking Tennessee to cover.
all right.
Seems crazy.
All right. There's our picks for the day. So you'll get yourself started with $150 in bonus bets when you win. If you win your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. Thank you all for listening. And if you have not already subscribed to us wherever you get your podcasts or YouTube, and I will be back again tomorrow. But let's talk about our predictions for this game. BC obviously won their first game since September against Syracuse and ended a 3-game slide. They lost their starting quarterback. Thomas Castellanos is gone. They've gone to Grayson James. SMU's a much different beast, as we've been talking about in this episode. Mitch, how bad is it going to get?
I think that BC is going to keep this close to the spread, but I'm not really willing to say that. I'm not super confident they're going to cover. I'm going to go with something like 41-20 or 41-21, something like that. It depends on if BC misses an extra point or not, which I guess the betting on that we probably have minus money at this point. So I'll go with 41. I'll go with 41-21. I'll try to have some faith. I think BC will have some success, but at the end of the day, this SMU offense is just going to be too overwhelming for them. Like I said, this is similar to Virginia Tech in that they have a very good running game, electric running back, a quarterback that can be a rushing threat, and then that quarterback is also a very dynamic passer. Kevin Jennings, again, very different player from what we saw last year. He's much better. He's probably the best quarterback BC is going to play all year. I'm thinking Tyler between him, Tyler Shuck, and Kyron Drones, Kevin Jennings is probably the best quarterback they're going to play all year.
Which is crazy because I didn't think he looked all that great last year.
Yeah.
But
again, monsoon in a swamp. So
right, exactly. It was just an odd situation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I am not predicting this to be very close. I kept looking at what score I'd give BC, and then I kept coming up with numbers that included a field goal, and I really told myself I got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with SMU 35, BC 14.
Oof.
The speed is what worries me.
Yeah.
For years, Boston College has struggled against teams with speed. Good teams with speed. I mean, Florida State this year has speed, I'm sure, but they're not good. But SMU is very good. So I'm going to say that they're going to have some trouble. They're going to let up some explosives.
And if you think about the Fenway Bowl last year, there were a lot of plays where Kevin Jennings was throwing downfield and just missed his receiver. A little too far. He's a lot more dialed in now. And now that he's more experienced, he's better at that. In a game where, again, the weather's going to be great against a BC secondary that, again, missing Amari Jackson, someone under demand, those plays might hit. So that's going to be that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big issue moving forward for BC. So I think there's going to be some big plays. I've watched some of these SMU games. I know you watched a lot more than I have, and it just stands out how fast they are. It's very apparent. So I'm going to pick them to lose big. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully this is not.
We picked them to lose in the Fenway Bowl last year. So
true. I picked them to lose against Florida State, who's another fast team. So maybe I'll go for 3. Fade on everything AJ picks, right? So thank you all for listening. We'll be back. I'll be back on Saturday to recap the game. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. Mitch, where people can find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Also, I think that's my handle on Blue Sky, since a lot of people are moving over there. If you're on Blue Sky, you can follow me there. But I don't post there as much. I'm going to start doing that a little more. But then obviously check out our work on Eagle Insider. Had a really long matchup report for this game. And then if you could watch if you go back and watch the offensive rewatch from the Syracuse game, I had some really cool nuggets in there, and also the one from the West Kentucky game where should give you a good idea of what Grayson James was doing well, where some problems were, and where sometimes the problems weren't necessarily his fault, and those things BCS to clean up in the upcoming game.
All right. Thank you all for following along. Follow us on Twitter at LockedOnBC. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. And I'll see you all again on Saturday for another episode of Locked On Boston College. Your team every day.